Hi everyone, I have a card to share with you featuring a beautiful set of products from Altenew's September release, Bold Bouquet. This stamp set has a coordinating die set, a layering stencil set, and also, to take it really to the next level, a 3D embossing folder. This is a gorgeous image. I'm going to be stamping it in my stamping platform on Bristol Smooth cardstock. After the image has been stamped, I'm not going to remove the stamp from the stamping platform. I'll keep it in place, do the stenciling, and then I'm going to do some heat embossing. I love that Altenew's layering stencils come with a guide, making it very clear how to use the stencils. The stencils have an etch number indicating the order in which they are to be used. This is difficult for my eyes to read, so I just renumber them with a felt marker. And as you can see, as I'm numbering them, there are 4 stencils to this set. I'll be working with Altenew's fresh dye inks and applying them with a small blending brush. For the first stencil, I'll start off using Deep Iris right at the base of the flower petals, and each of the petals will be finished off with a soft pink cotton candy. And you'll see right at the end of all the stenciling, the entire floral arrangement completed. I wasn't entirely happy with the depth that I created. I went back to stencils 1, 2, and 4 and did some partial re-stenciling with deeper tones. And actually I did this after I had completed the embossing. So really, stenciling is extremely forgiving. Because the different tones of inks are being blended together, it really does allow you to make adjustments and not have to start all over again. Even when I'm stenciling in some of those smaller areas, I still like to use at least 2 colors of ink. This helps to provide some highlights and lowlights, giving depth to the flowers. I'm not sure if you can see this in the video, but when I'm working on those really small areas, I'll angle that brush so that I'm applying the ink just with the tip of the bristles. If you are not confident with coloring, stenciling is really the way to go. It is fast and it is easy, and as I've mentioned before, it is forgiving. And that completes stencil 1, and now I'll go ahead, remove this, and line up stencil 2. And I'm just using a little bit of Post-it note to hold that stencil in place. I'm going ahead and applying the very same colors using the exact same method that I used for stencil 1. And I'm about to ink an area that's quite close to another opening, so I'm using a little bit of Post-it note to protect it. And in a matter of just a few minutes, stencil 2 is complete, and I'll go ahead, remove it, and line up my 3rd stencil. The flowers will be completed using Stencil 3, and I'll continue using the Deep Iris and Cotton Candy inks. Stencil 3 has an additional layer off in the corner, so I'm going to remove the stencil, give it a good wipe and dry, and then line up that other section. And that completes the flower portion of the stenciling. Well, not really, because I am going to go back in after I've done the background and the embossing and add in some deeper tones. Stencil 4 is all about the leaves, and like Stencil 3, it has 2 layering sections. I'm going to be using a deep green Forest Glades with a lighter green frayed leaf. I'll start off with the darker green at the base of the leaf. And I kind of messed up there, and I was picking up ink from the wrong ink pad, but no worries. I just go back in and add in the dark ink again. When I switch over to the lighter green ink, I'm going to continue with the same blending brush. To clean off the dark ink, I just give it a good rub on some scrap paper. Before I line up the second layering section on this stencil, I'm first going to clean it. For this set of leaves, I'm going to start off with the lighter green ink frayed leaf and then finish up with a bright highlight using buttercream. You may notice that when I pick up ink from the ink pad that oftentimes I'll tap off ink onto some scrap paper. I do this so that I have some control over the saturation of the ink. I don't want necessarily too much ink applied at once, and then the color can be built up. You can add in depth a lot more easily than you can take it away. With all the stenciling sort of completed, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the background. I love how a dark background can really make an image pop. I have a tendency to lean towards the more dramatic, so this is like right up my alley. I have tried this blackout technique with a few different markers. In my opinion, the Copic 100 black marker provides the most solid background without leaving any marker lines. I've noticed that there's another black marker by Copic called Special Black. I have no idea what the difference would be, but it's actually on my list to buy and try it out. In coloring the background, I begin by edging the image and doing any of those interior bits. I then go in and complete the background by keeping all of the brush strokes going in the same direction. To ensure that the background is nice and consistently black, I do go in and apply a second coat of ink. This goes quickly because I don't take the ink right up to the image's edge. And I'm ready to do my embossing. The stamp has not been moved in my stamping platform, so I can simply pop my panel in and I'll know that the image will line up perfectly with the stamp. This stamp had been inked up well with Versamark, a clear sticky ink, and now I'm going to coat the image with gold embossing powder, and I do it over a coffee filter so that I can catch all of the mess. This is a big image, so I do it in 2 steps, and now I'm going to add in the powder on the other side. Heat will cause cardstock to warp. To help minimize this, I do a couple of things. Before I start applying the heat to the cardstock panel, I first make sure that my heat tool has come to its maximum temperature. That way I know that I'm going to get a quick melt. I also apply the heat to both the front and the back of the panel. That will help flatten it out. There will be a little bit of warping though. Gold embossing looks fabulous against the dark background, but I want it to be a little bit dimensional, so I'm actually going to go back in, re-ink the stamp with Versamark, stamp it again, and apply the embossing powder a second time. When the heat is applied, the embossing powder will melt super quickly because it is already on top of the emboss line, which will hold the heat. And with the second coat of embossing, it just really pops. I just love that there is a coordinating embossing folder for this stamp set, which can be purchased separately. Stamped image is easily lined up to the one on the embossing folder. And after I run it through the die cutter, just look at the added dimension. It is fabulous. Next, I trim my panel down so that it will measure 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I had a little bit of white showing here and there, and so I touched that up. And while I was doing that, I decided that I would make sure that all of the white would virtually disappear by taking my marker's nib and running it on the edge all the way around the perimeter of the panel. So this is the point when I decided that I did need to add some more depth to the flowers and some of the leaves. So I'm going to go in with Stencil 1 and add some sapphire right at the base of the petals. To help blend it out, I'm not going to add more of the deep iris ink that was originally used, but I am going to use the blender brush, which will have a little bit of ink still left on it, and then give it just a light rub to make the blue blend in. And I'll do the same thing with Stencil 2. I'm going to add in some evergreen, which is a very dark green on the base of the leaves, just in the one section on Stencil 4. I'm using the same blender brush that was used for Forest Glade. There's still a little bit of ink on it, just enough to blend out that dark green. And so now I'm happy with the result. The sentiments included in the Bold Bouquet stamp set are laid out on the panel. Secondary sentiment, Make My Heart Smile, is stamped directly on the panel with Versamark ink and gold embossed. The main sentiment U is going to be stamped with black VersaFine ink directly onto some gold foil cardstock. It's difficult to get a solid image, and I stamp it a couple of times. Ink on the foil will take a long time to dry, so I coat it in clear embossing powder. The die from the coordinating die set was used to cut both the sentiment and black sheet foam. The panel was adhered to a gold foil panel that measured just slightly smaller than A2 sized, 4 1/8 inch by 5 3/8 inch, and then onto a black A2 sized card base. The die cut sentiment was adhered to a black foam die cut and then mounted onto the card. And this card was finished up with some pretty half gold foil pearls. I hope you enjoyed this dramatic card featuring Altenew's Bold Bouquet. This is a gorgeous floral design, And the coloring is so easy with the coordinating layering stencil set. And what about that extra dimension with the 3D embossing folder? Thank you so much for stopping by, and as always, I appreciate your visit.